Okay, it looks like we're rolling here. We're going to come to order. Today is the regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 21st. Could I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Ramirez.
Here.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Here.
Commissioner Darrow.
Here.
Commissioner Manukian. And Chair Kane.
Here. Report regarding posting of agenda, please.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Wednesday, May 14th, 2008, on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Would you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have approval of minutes from May 7th. Any comments from the Commission?
I have one comment, and I hate to do this, but it's a correction of a correction. On item 4, where it said that I had, item 4, number 1, page 4, Mr. Droz said, applicant, we continue the motion and findings to a future meeting to allow further discussion and comment, not further discussion and element. Not sure what further discussion and element would have been, but...
Period after discussion?
Further discussion would be fine. I just avoid the confusion of an element. Thank you.
Any other comments or corrections? Seeing none, may we have a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Second.
Motion, support, call roll, please.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Yes.
Commissioner Darrow.
Aye.
Chair Kane.
Aye, and a vote of 4-0. The minutes of May 7th have been approved. We'll move on. We're short one of our commissioners. He's supposed to join us shortly. So rather than go with the variance that's first on the agenda, we're going to hold off on that so that we have potentially all 5 of our commissioners able to participate in that. So I am going to suggest to my fellow commissioners that we act on item 7B first. And if we have no objection from that, and if staff is prepared.
No objection.
No objection.
So we'll move with 7B. Is staff ready to proceed with 7B, which is Doran?
Doran.
All right. It's agenda item 7B. It's tentative track map 70234. This was continued from May 7th, 2008. The location is 368 West Doran. It's APN number 5637-003-025. And it's a request to subdivide a proposed new 2-story multifamily development consisting of 6 condominium units over a semi-subterranean garage in the R1250 high-density residential zone. The project is deemed categorically exempt from CEQA. The applicant is Jack Lau, and staff is represented by Brad Collin. It is a recommendation for us to consider approving the tentative track map. Staff overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. As mentioned, this is tentative track number 70234, located at 368 West Doran Street. The subject proposal is to subdivide 7,875 square foot, 2-story residential multifamily building for condominium purposes. Proposed project will entail 6 residential units in the R1250 residential zone. As of this time, no building permit has been issued for the project to date. The project will entail demolition. Actually, the lot is vacant at this time. On a staff visit, the site is located east of Columbus Avenue, west of Central, south of the 134 freeway. The site is also surrounded by multifamily zoning. The immediate street block is comprised of 2-story multifamily buildings and a few single-family homes. Vehicular access to the project's semi-subterranean garage is from Doran Street. Doran Street is identified as an urban collector and is presently improved with a 60-foot right-of-way. The proposed project has been through the Design Review Board and approved on June 15th of 2006 and is compliant with all zoning code requirements. Staff is recommending approval of this project.
Thank you.
Available for any questions.
All right. Do we have questions from the commission? Just to refresh my memory, we continued on May 7th to have an acoustical study completed. Was that?
That was done and included in your packets.
And what is your opinion on the,
The analysis that was done by the acoustical engineer, all the numbers fell within the noise elements guidelines.
all right, thank you very much. No other questions from the commission. I've got one speaker card. It's Serge Adanian.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Serge Adamian. I'm the tract engineer representing the applicant. I don't have any comments, just that we reviewed the conditions and no objections, no comment.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, all right, thank you, sir. Any closing comments from staff? If not, we'll enter deliberations or comments from commissioners, and obviously entertain a motion. Looking for it?
I've got it.
I just have a general question from staff, and this pertains to the recreation, the parks. Most of the projects that come before us pretty much have the same comment under parks. And since one of the issues in the city is under parked substantially, what position has the city taken in terms of creating or assisting in the creation of parks? Well, I guess the answer would be, if I'm correct, would be that this falls under the impact fee for parks.
That is correct.
And
They would
what
be
is
paying
that?
fees as part of the plan check process.
You know what that fee roughly would be for 6 units? If you don't, that's fine, but
I believe it's right now about $2,000 per unit, but it's escalating. It will go up in future years.
thank you.
Kind of a phase in, you know. I think eventually, I don't remember the time frame, but I think it goes from something like 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000. Don't quote me on those figures exactly, but that's roughly what it is.
And the cost that this project will incur will be dependent on when it's issued a building permit?
That's right.
That, and also based off the date when it went through the design review project, there are some projects that are considered pipelines if they're in before a certain date, which I think is before December of 2007. Approval for the design review, it's a different set of fees.
All right, thank you.
Did this fall under pipeline? I don't recall if this was...
Yeah, this
in front
was
of design.
before, back in
All right.
2006.
So is it considered a pipeline project?
Yes. Because it was approved from design review on June 15th of 2006.
Do we want to consider a condition that it be held to the more current recreational fees or improvement fees? I only broached
Well-
that.
Well, I thought he said it would, or somebody mentioned $2,000 per unit was what this would be assessed?
Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't considering pipeline. If Brad knows that it's the pipeline project, there's,
I guess where I'm going from, whatever it is, I'd suggest that we do it with what's current today. Now it was 2006. If it's the same fee structure, so be it. But I think it's
with that.
appropriate to use today's, make that a condition of approval.
I would go along with that.
I wouldn't, unless Mr. Garcia was present and advised us on that.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that there's a reason why pipeline projects had their fees waived, and for us to, as a matter of a
Well,
condition, tying it to
If it's legal,
some finding.
if it's legal, I would prefer the present date as the time frame. But if it isn't, if it's not legal based on the ordinance, then obviously we can't do it. So
I think there is something to be said for vesting rights. I don't know that necessarily a DRB review approval is a vesting right.
Well, I appreciate that. I also don't like the concept of all these people trying to shove their way into a pipeline and then leave the city holding the bag for the increased cost of services and it not being fairly compensated. I mean, that's just my
I'm
concept.
sympathetic to that point of view, but on the other hand, the DRB was mid-June 2006, which means they probably started the project in 2004. You know, I mean, it's not, I don't see that they're shoving it into a pipeline so much as it happened to fall within some arbitrary cutoff date.
They don't even have a permit yet. I mean, this is, if that was, did you say 2004?
No, 2006 is when they got their
2006, right.
DRB approval,
So
which means to me they started this project a lot earlier than 2006, because it took a while to get to the point of getting a DRB review. So I don't feel like they're shoving
We
it
really
into
don't
the
know the
pipeline
facts.
kind of
I think
thing.
my position is if it's legal to go ahead and include today's standards, but if it isn't, obviously, it'll go by
Well, we're
line.
only going to get 2 votes that way, it sounds like to me, Richard. I mean, it doesn't sound like, Mr. Torgerson, you're not in favor of it, correct?
I don't think
I
so.
don't believe you are either.
No, I think there's a reason why there's a
All right,
pipeline and grandfathering.
all right, we'll let it go then on that concept.
I do like parks, though.
Me too.
Well, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to afford to build one now.
Well, they have a sitting area.
Very good. All right, well, that,
Amenities had recreation amenities were seating.
all right, that idea,
This one.
that idea will not get necessary votes, so we'll move on. Still searching for a motion.
I would move that upon consideration of tentative tract number 70234, and after reviewing the records, files, reports, and documentary evidence, with regard to said tentative tract, that we approve it in accordance with the motion presented by staff.
Second that one.
We have a motion and support. Please call roll.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Yes.
Commissioner Giroux.
Aye.
And Chair Kane.
Aye, on a vote of 4-0, tentative tract map number 70234 has been approved. Well,
The G.
yeah,
It's Leonard
Polaris or the variance?
Go to Polaris.
I think so, too.
Since
All right,
continued
we're going to continue bouncing the agenda a little bit. We're going to go to 7A, which is tentative tract map GLN 1619. This was continued from March 5th, 2008. It's located at 1979 Polaris Drive, APN number 5650-038-022. It's a request to subdivide a 5.13 acre lot into 2 for single-family residential development. A negative declaration has been prepared for the project, and it's proposed for adoption by the Planning Commission. The applicant is Raphael Dizan, Jr. Staff is represented by Jeff Hamilton. The recommendation is to approve the tentative tract map. Staff overview, please.
Your glasses okay?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this project is a proposal to divide the property, about the 5-acre property, into 2 parcels. It would be retaining the existing house on the westerly parcel and then creating a pad for a new house on the easterly parcel. The tentative parcel map here shows the topography and the location of most of the trees. The grading plans show the preliminary grading scheme in order to accommodate the development. The lower version of the grading plan shows just a blown up or zoomed in area. The grading plan now shows a feasible development that meets the zoning ordinance, even if the house ultimately is not built for some time. The earlier scheme had a wall that was quite tall and would not have conformed to the zoning if the house wasn't actually built. This one does conform to the zoning, or would conform to the zoning. This is the preliminary or conceptual development plan for the house, for a house on the site. This is not necessarily the house that will actually get built, but this again proves that it's feasible to build a house on the property that meets code. This image here is a photorealistic representation of what this house would look like on the property in context with the existing house. The point to make of this is the most obvious reason why this is at all feasible on such a steep site is that the applicant is taking advantage of the large existing concrete driveway pad that serves the existing house and is using much of that as the basis for the grading and for the pad for the new house. In the newest concept before you, the new driveway is going to be elevated a few feet above the existing driveway, and there's going to be a small wall to provide separation. And now there'll be separate and independent access to each driveway and each garage that, again, meets code. The aerial photography shows the existing house and the existing concrete pad in relation to the hillside. And then this aerial photograph shows the rough boundaries of this property. The zoning in the area is all single-family except for a portion of some city-owned open space land to the west, to the northwest. The property is partially within a secondary ridge line, and it is also partially within a primary ridge line, and it does not have any identified significant landslide hazards other than the one that was disclosed in the new revised soils report, which was described essentially as a superficial shallow slope failure. The revised soils report, which was provided at the request of the Planning Commission, examined the property and examined this issue and has provided a feasible development scheme for the site that accounts for that slope failure and will guarantee that it can be safely developed should that occur. This has been through the process for quite some time. We've been working back and forth with the applicant, who have actually been pretty accommodating in terms of meeting the city's requirements and producing documents and producing plans that show a feasible development of the site. The project at this time conforms to all the codes of the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. The site, again, would require a dedication of about 6.5 feet along the frontage to provide a street widening, to meet public works requirements, to meet fire department requirements. The whole site is going to be designated, that whole side of the property is going to be designated no parking, because the street, even with the widening, is still going to be rather narrow, and this will provide adequate access through the property. The revised development scheme for the property has increased the grading from approximately 670 cubic yards in the original conception to about 1,452 cubic yards. This equates to roughly 146 truck trips of dirt that would have to be exported from the property.
And they would need a CUP for that.
Yes, they'll need a conditional use permit to export, I think it's more than 1,500 cubic yards, so they will not need a CUP. They're just under that threshold. But because the property is more than 50% slope, they'll need a CUP for that. The average slope of the property is roughly 65%. So prior to developing the site, they'll have to go through design review. They'll have to get a conditional use permit for any house plan that they choose to pursue. There are a variety, in addition to the mitigation measure and condition of approval requiring the no parking and the dedication, there are also a variety of mitigation measures to address the oak trees on the property, and in fact, one oak tree is proposed to be removed as a result of the expanded grading area for the property. Based on the revised design that conforms to the code, it's Planning Department's recommendation that the project be approved. Do you have any questions?
Questions from the commission?
The fire, I believe that there's a fire road at the ridge, of the top of the ridge. Shown in the topo, probably on the upper left-hand map.
One does not appear that I can see, except there might be a faint, an old one.
What about this? This is a really different kind.
Yeah, it might be. If you look at the aerial photography, you don't see anything that's at all been recently graded, so that might have been put in many years ago. But yes, from the topo itself, it looks like that's a road that's been cut.
I remember addressing that when it first came to us, and that is has been a problem throughout all of the mountain areas throughout the county. Those are basically pushover fills, uncompacted pushover fills that have failed in many places. And as a matter of fact, the city of Glendale is involved in the litigation right now on a case over in Canyon. So I mentioned that in the very beginning, the report, as I recall, does not mention that. Anything about it does not even have a superficial stability analysis.
Could you try to speak into the microphone, please?
Yeah. I'm concerned about the superficial stability of this property, and I did not see this report that was submitted in our packet address the superficial stability of the slope above the proposed development, and I didn't see anything pertaining to the hazards or potential hazards of the spillover fill from the fire road. And I believe that the State Subdivision Map Act requires that the developer prove by a factor of 1.5 or greater that there is a factor safety against this problem. And I don't see that in the report. It's official.
Now, I'm going to defer to the applicant's engineer, who hopefully his soil engineer is present and can respond to your detailed questions about the soils report.
Right. Okay. And the other questions I see, I have pertains to the series of retaining walls and the temporary excavations that will be required, whether by shoring or whatever. I didn't see anything that addressed shoring in the report, so if we could address, whoever's going to talk about that can address those issues, I would appreciate it.
Okay, we'll redirect that when the appellant is up, or the applicant, rather. Anything else for staff?
Just a question about the, mitigation or any mitigation proposed for the loss of the single oak tree?
They have to pay for it.
Usually, and it's been a while since I've looked at this, usually they're required to assess, I think it's condition number 5. Removal of the tree requires a permit. The developer's required to come up with an assessed value of the tree. Any difference between the value of the tree planted and the value of the tree that is removed is deposited with the City of Glendale Forestry Fund. So there'll have to be an assessment of the value of the existing tree, and they'll have to place into the city tree fund the difference in the value for any trees that are planted or not planted theoretically on the site.
Do you happen to know what the value of a 12-inch oak tree is now?
I don't know, but I could look it up. It's probably quite high for a 12-inch oak tree.
Be interested in knowing.
I'll try to find out.
Thank you. Any other questions at this moment for staff? Yes.
I did have one question on
Torres.
actually I had two questions. I can't find one of them, however. But in the motion, for instance, which usually has a number of conditions, is there somewhere where this geological soils and engineering exploration becomes part of the conditions of approval? Because it has specific directions in here that need to be followed.
I think it's referenced.
C talks about a soils report.
I think it's referenced in the Public Works conditions. But if it's not, you can certainly make it a part of the conditions of approval. if it's not in here, it's simply my oversight. We typically reference the recommendations of the soils report.
Public Works number 4. On page 2.
I would simply recommend that
Yeah, it's in there.
if you,
Two of them, there's an original one, there's a revised one, and for legal reasons, you probably want to reference both of those explicitly in the document.
if the commission chooses to recommend approval or to approve the project, I would just recommend that we add an additional condition under the planning department standards or requirements, is that all the recommendations of the soils report dated X and Y shall be incorporated into the project. Something simple like that.
Or future reports.
Or future
Because I
reports.
think there'll be some future.
And where was the condition, my second question was, where was the condition to make the curb red?
Oh, that is a mitigation measure attached to the resolution for the environmental mitigations.
Under O.
Okay.
Mitigation measure 9, under O.
So rather than saying that the curb should be red in front of a specific address, because as soon as they build a new house, there's 2 addresses now, it probably should be worded, the curb should be red along the frontage of the both subdivided tracts.
Yeah, we can certainly make that change.
I'm just demonstrating that I read this. Yeah, just a little nitpicky, but just to get the detail.
How about the entire parcel map?
Yeah. That's good.
For A and B.
Pardon?
Parcel A and parcel B.
I've
it's
proposed
one
entire
parcel
map.
16, 19, okay.
Includes all.
That's fine. Yep.
No further questions of the staff.
Any other questions at this time for staff? All right, we've got one speaker card, but I think we'll probably also ask the soils engineer to weigh in eventually. The card I have is from Hayek Martirosyan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner and City Planning staff. My name is Hayek Martirosyan. I'm tract engineer for this project. This has been a very long process. We started this project almost in 2004, and after going back and forth with the city staff, we come up with the latest plan that have it on the board. This property, as you might know, it's a pretty large property. It's 5.23 acres. And our parcels after subdivision will be 2.2 and 2.93, which are larger than most of the properties within 500 radius in that vicinity. Actually, 6.6 times larger than the properties in that vicinity. The scheme of this project was to utilize that graded pad that we had to minimize the amount of the grading to construct a house in that area. By going back and forth, we come up with this plan that by grading almost 1,400 cubic yard, we can achieve that goal. We have visited all the conditions of municipal and subdivision, and we are in conformance with all those conditions. And we fully will comply with the staff recommendation and conditions to have this subdivision completed. To go over one item that making the entire side of the property as a red curb, we had discussion with transportation. Due to location of the house and the street, which is curving around this property, that's what they were suggesting, to have that one side to be red curb. But if you look at the entire property, it's only in a couple of places that we have sharp curve. So myself, I don't have any problem to red curb the entire parcel, but I think it will be nice to have the curb only be red at the portions that are had sharper curvature. So at least the neighbor will have enough room. I mean, if in case they have some kind of guest or something, they can park on that street. But still, that's up to commissioners. If they feel that they need that area to be a red curb, we will go along with it. I just want to bring this up to you guys. I have our soil and geologist consultant with us today, and if you have a question, she will be able to answer any concerns that you have.
I am sure we have a question based on what I heard earlier. Perhaps they could approach.
Sure.
And are there any questions for Mr. Martirossi at this moment? Not at this second, anyway.
Good afternoon. My name is Selena Abrahamson. I work for the John Byer Group, and I wrote the original and the update report for the site. And the reason for the update report is the original report had a different plan, and that plan was revised, and so we provided an update showing the new plan. And as far as the questions that were asked previously by Ramirez, on page 20 and 21 of the March 5th, 2008 report, it gives the recommendations for temporary excavations, which include a row of soldier piles with spacing of 8 feet on center for the rear yard retaining wall. And so due to the angle of the slope and the height of the planned cut, that's what was recommended for the rear yard wall.
And that's for this wall right along here.
Yes, the very one in the back, behind the residence.
So there's no page number on your temporary excavation height calculation attached to the back of the report. It's calculation sheet number 2. At the bottom of that, you indicate that the temporary vertical excavations are safe up to 9 feet, and then the back slope will be 1-to-1. So that is not the case, is that correct?
There are excavations for the lower retaining walls for the residence, which will be in the bedrock, for the rear residence wall, which will be approximately 10 feet in height, which will expose bedrock, and so that calculation sheet refers to this particular wall and walls that are excavated in the bedrock.
Not the back wall, then?
Not the back wall.
So the back wall will be
Short.
drill piles and then excavated out.
Yes.
That's got about a 16-foot-high wall plus a freeboard,
Yes.
and that freeboard is how high?
It's 3 feet.
All right. And my question pertaining to the superficial stability analysis of the upper slope?
Right. There is no superficial stability analysis because since there has been a history of superficial failures on the site is not considered superficially stable. So with that being established, what we've done is provided recommendations to construct the site with that being the case. And if you look at the conclusions on page 11, it discusses the superficial failures and the fact that the development of the site will remove the toe of the superficial failures, which is where the majority of the debris has fallen to the bottom of the slope. And so that will be removed with the development. And test pit 6, which is within the superficial failure, has 1.5 feet. Look at the test pit logs.
1.5 to 1 3/4 foot of debris, I think is
Right,
what you found.
exactly, which should be trimmed and removed.
But what about the slope above the rear retaining wall?
The existing slope, test pit 7 is, it's test pit 5. It's right on the edge of the superficial failures, so it's considered outside of the superficial instability areas. and that test pit had 1/4 of a foot of colluvium and some weathered bedrock, and so outside of the broad swale, the amount of superficial material is minimal.
In the question of the fire road and the spillover fill generated from the creation of the fire road?
The majority of the fire road is located at atop the ridge, which is angled at a direction away from the development. There's a small portion of the fire road which lines up with one edge of the development, which could be trimmed and removed as part of the grading for the site. 'Cause usually those roads will have some spill fill that is placed on the downslope side, which is, it would be at the top of the slope, a wedge of fill,
right.
which, if we could draw a cross-section and project that, we could dig test pits, but it's such a small area. Usually those roads, it's not a very large road, and it's on the top of a ridge, and so...
You could add that recommendation for a supplement report, correct?
Of course.
And you could also do a stability analysis as a supplement report for the portion?
No, not a stability analysis, because...
Superficial.
Since there's a history of superficial failures, we know that the site is not superficially stable.
All right.
And so even though that's the case, we can present mitigation measures to still provide a development that is safe by having the freeboard, which is 3 feet, which is much more than what's typically recommended as freeboard for our residents, even with a steep slope. Usually we would recommend 1 foot or 18 inches of freeboard.
Could you do us a favor maybe and come up and indicate on this map where this toe of the stable area is, some mitigation measure you might suggest? My keys are going. Okay. This kind of being the track at the fire road, and this being the new house.
Yes. I'm sorry, what is it that you want?
So you're assuming all of this is unstable because it's already demonstrated instability, and so the mitigation right now is just to build this retaining wall along here to protect the new property. And any instability from this point over this way goes away from the property. Just making sure I understand what you're saying. Anything in this area is going to be hit by the stopped by the retaining wall, mitigated by the retaining wall, hopefully. But then there's no mitigation for anything out here, and at the area.
Well, I'm concerned about this whole slope behind your building, of course. And the reason for that, obviously, is because, as you indicated, pointed out very clearly, that the whole slope is considered to be sufficiently unstable.
Right.
That's why the retaining wall is being put.
For a freeboard, I don't know if it is the impact, but I would like to see an analysis of the volume and the impact. That's really getting into a lot of detail for the planning commission, but I would like to add conditions that the applicant submit an updated report, and when it goes to building safety, that they include a superficial analysis of the volume and consider the use of deflection walls. That's normally what's used on these kind of
Mr. Ramirez,
projects.
just a reminder about the microphone. Just a reminder about the microphone.
So,
I'm not sure that these...
So I don't want to get involved in a lot of details. I just happen to know a lot about this kind of subject and a lot of problems, and I just don't want the city to get into litigation. But if the consultant addresses those kind of issues in a supplement report, I'm concerned about safety because, in my opinion, or in another hat, I'm a licensed engineering geologist as well, and I would like to see the complete work done before a tentative track or a tentative parcel map is approved, because the State Subdivision Map Act actually calls for it. However, depending on my colleagues, I'm willing to postpone it until a later time, because it can be done. It can be done. It might cost a lot of money, and to put deflection walls, for example, and to harness. And I'm sure you're familiar with deflection walls.
Yes, usually, I think when I look at the slope, I look at it from the standpoint of you go directly up the slope of the development. And so when you look at the residence, it's actually the retaining wall that's planned is the majority of it is parallel with the slope. And so there's a cross-section that's drawn through that area, and that continues up to the slope, and it actually ends at the top of the ridge that goes down to Polaris Drive. It does not go up to the top of the ridge where the fire road is. And
all those details you can explain in a supplement report.
Okay.
That's fine. And we don't need to discuss all those technical details any further, I believe. I just wanted to bring them to your attention and to the attention of staff and my colleagues that this commissioner is very concerned about approving a parcel map that's got geologic hazard on it.
Right. Yeah, as far as deflection walls, usually that's something that's designed by a civil engineer. Civil engineer would do a volume calculation based on the area of the property, and but the slopes on this site are going in different. They're not all aimed at the residence. Usually, I've seen deflection walls planned for a residence that's located in kind of the apex of a bowl-shaped canyon where all the drainage is coming down to the residence. And so at this site, that's not the case. And so, I didn't just write this report on my own. It was reviewed by the geotechnical engineer in my office and also by John Beyer. And both of them felt that this was sufficient for this site because of the angle of the slope, the location of the development, and the location of the retaining walls.
If they could explain it and justify it, that's all building safety would want, I'm sure. But
well, let's make sure when we make a motion on the track map that we craft some language that will reinforce the safety issues that you're expressing, Mr. Ramirez. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions for this speaker? All right, seeing none, I have no other cards. I guess we would welcome comments from fellow commissioners, concerns. I have a couple things I'd like to discuss, but I'm going to ask the commission if they have any comments. Oh, and for the record, let's note that Mr. Mnuchin has joined us. I'm not sure which point you came in as to whether you're able to participate on this motion.
I came in when Mr. Margerosin was making his presentation, but since I was not here during the staff presentation, I would prefer to abstain from.
That's fine. But you'll be able to carry on with the rest of us after that. Very good. Well, lacking anything else, I guess the biggest concern that I have is that we're dealing with some very significant retaining walls. They basically jut out on a 1-to-1 ratio from the back of the house. I mean, we have a 15-foot wall 15 feet away from the back of the home. That whole area looks to be about 10 feet up from the house. If I'm reading an elevation like 1134 and then 1143 and then a retaining wall, and I find this beautiful green rendering that's been put up on it doesn't show any of those massive retaining walls. And I have to say there's a home that was planted before some of the more recent codes on the lane, which is in my neighborhood, and it has a similar situation, and aesthetically it's pretty offensive. It's very abrupt, it's very strong, it's fortress-like, and so I have some real qualms as it relates to that type of retaining wall structure and its massiveness.
$15 foot in the back is maximum allowable code.
It is, but it's also 15 feet away from the wall. When you go back outside, you're basically in a racquetball court. You have, I mean, it's a Hollywood Hills kind of feel.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of gray concrete. And it's also, maybe I'm not catching something. Let's say the center part of the home, that's at elevation 1134. Okay, so we have something at 1134. Then we have, just outside that, something at 1143? Or is that an existing grade line? It looks like it's final grade or finished grade.
Which map are you looking at?
Oh. Am I misreading that somehow? We've got 1134,
Yeah,
and then we have 1143.
right.
Is that new? I mean, that's obviously new for the home.
Right.
And this is another 9 feet up,
Backyard, yeah.
9 feet above the home,
Or 16.
and then a 15-foot retention
16-foot high retaining
16.
wall, plus freeboard.
plus freeboard.
Yeah.
So,
Chairman,
16,
Chairman Kane,
Yes,
that's,
please.
you are correct. The first floor elevation is 1134, and the second one is 1143. And the backyard starts from the second story.
Okay, so
that
the backyard is coming off the second
That's
story.
correct.
then, all
That's
right?
correct. So we have 15 feet back from our second floor, and the first floor is just tucking into the hill. That's to minimize the grading.
And from the street, which is around 1115, we're now 43 feet plus freeboard, looking at a concrete
We
wall.
have, our retaining wall is 15 feet, which is including that 3 feet freeboard. So
That includes the
that's
freeboard?
correct, yes. So at least it's a 12 feet high retaining wall with 3 feet of freeboard.
And that's
what,
the most that they can go according to code also.
Right. I don't know, it just seems uncomfortable and, what should I say? Soviet Union-ish.
Well, it's a really difficult site, and it seems like basically you're trying to cram a home with the existing very harsh codes to the city of Glendale. In L.A., you could do it, but in Glendale, because of the so many restrictions on wall height and zoning code, it's really kind of forcing this house into that situation, and of course, the unstable nature of the slope really concerns me.
What, was there any neighborhood comment regarding this?
We've had exactly one resident express concern about the project. They came to one of the earlier meetings. Another resident expressed some concern about how this might impact her house to the west, but I explained to her that the proposed development is, far, far away from that and would not, there's no potential impact to her. Those are the only two comments we've ever received.
I mean, in defense of it, I like the fact that they kind of grouped the housing to create more open space.
And that's one of the things we promote with our hillside development guidelines.
So I defend that. I just don't like what we're forced to see with those, again, from my perspective, a pretty massive retaining wall.
Well, the one thing I'll point out in that regard is with the preliminary grading plan, the 15-foot high wall would not be there until the house actually is there also. In the preliminary grading plan that they have to do, that they have to develop before they pull building permits, as this is a condition of the final map, they have to do the preliminary grading plan with that pad and the low wall heights that have a maximum height of 5 feet exposed. So that's what would be up there before a house gets built. You will not see a 15-foot high wall.
So part of our rationale is that 15-foot high wall is blocked by the second floor and a good portion of the roof line.
Yes.
So what little might be exposed at grade would be reduced. I mean, I'm looking at a rationale, so.
The applicant can probably best speak to this, either the designer or the engineer. It seems to me that the 15-foot high wall, as built, will be largely invisible from the street because the house is so tight up against the wall. It would not be the kind of house and backyard necessarily that I might enjoy, but it seems it's largely their burden and not something that would be imposed on the neighborhood per se.
What is Design Review Board going to see as it relates to renditions? Will their renditions pick up the retaining wall and
they'll have to go into considerably more detail than what you've seen here to really accurately represent what the house looks like, how it's going to sit on the hill, what the heights of things are, how exposed the retaining walls will be. for parcel map and subdivision purposes, you just need a conceptual plan.
Well, and the only reason I pointed out is it's been brought up in the past, I'm just not sure what design review's requirements are now. It used to be that architects would provide a really pretty picture of the house and ignore anything beyond the house. They wouldn't have to show the retaining walls. They wouldn't have to place the home in its context as much.
No, the total direction of the DRB now is to understand the context of the house, not only on the site, but in the neighborhood. They were going to have to, compared to 5 years ago, for example, they're going to have to do much more to reassure the Design Review Board that the house will be an attractive addition to the city.
Do you think that would be something that would be, that making it a condition that that type of elevation study be part of the design review plan submittal? Should we make that a condition, or do you think that's going to be handled properly through the design review process without it?
Personally, based on what I've seen with the new design review process and the discussions with the urban designer, I think it would be relatively redundant, but you're entitled to add that as a condition if you want.
Okay, well, we'll see what my commissioners feel about it.
Also, Mr. Chair, it appears to me that this rendering right here is fairly accurate from the angles and everything. The retaining wall is directly behind that house, and if you look straight up the driveway, you miss seeing the retaining wall, and if you look along the left-hand side of the house...
Yeah, I thought they were kind of cheating.
But it's only about 5 feet there.
Yeah.
So that's...
In any event. Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? Questions for the applicant?
And my only comment on what we've heard about so far was Mr. Martirosian's comment about painting the curb and curb red and everything, and I'm sympathetic to what he proposed, and I'm sure the owners of the properties would be sympathetic to the, wanting parking, but I'm not sure we know enough from where we sit to disagree with what the Public Works and the Fire Chief said about the red curb, so that's kind of an issue I think that the applicant would have to take up with the chief and the Public Works folks when they got to that point.
I would be hesitant to substitute the judgment without them having a chance to comment on that, but I will note that it's a mitigation measure, and if the applicant and city agree that there is a feasible alternative mitigation measure that accomplishes the same thing as this proposed, that can be altered administratively after the fact. It would not necessarily have to come back to you for reauthorization.
Excellent.
All right. I think we have two things to act on separately. One is a resolution on the mitigated negative declaration, and I guess we'll ask for a motion on that before I move on to the motion on the tentative parcel map.
I would move approval of the resolution relative to the mitigated negative declaration for tentative parcel map number GLN 1619.
With the amended language that the entire frontage of the entire parcel map shall be designated no parking?
Yes, with that amendment.
That's already in there, isn't it?
I think it was an address, and so...
Oh, got it.
Commissioner Torgerson
Good point.
wanted it to be-
I'm with what you're saying, exactly. Seeking support of the motion?
So I'll second the motion.
Motion and support for approving the resolution. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Ramirez?
No.
Commissioner Torgerson?
Aye.
Commissioner Giroux?
Aye.
Commissioner Manukian?
Abstain, please.
Chair Kane?
Aye, on a vote of 3-1 with one abstention, we have approved the resolution adopting the mitigated negative declaration for GLN 1619. Now let's move on to the motion for the tentative parcel map. That's where I'd like to see Mr. Ramirez help craft some language.
What I had just briefly come up with, if it's to your pleasure, is all recommendations of any soils reports pertaining to the project site shall be incorporated into the site and building plans.
Soils and engineering geologic reports.
Soils and engineering geologic reports.
And we also want to include she mentioned that the analysis of the volumes has to be conducted by a civil engineer, so we want to make sure that that's included in there as well.
Well, is that perhaps more detail than we need to put into the condition? Is that perhaps something that's...
If we don't put it in, it won't be done.
You know what? What we're going to say in that condition is including but not necessarily limited to, and then that specific request on Mr. Ramirez's part, if there's no objection.
Including, but...
Well, you're abstaining.
Necessarily limited to, say that again, Mr. Ramirez?
An analysis of the debris, potential debris volumes.
Potential debris volumes. Okay. Now that would become new mitigation, condition 13, and we've got 13 rather than 15 originally, so now we have a total of 14 conditions. Unless you want to do something about the red curb as part of the conditions.
I think it's addressed in the mitigated neg deck, yeah.
Keep as is.
It's a mitigation measure.
Okay, so we have a total of 14 conditions then?
Sounds like it. We have
Is the fire road included in there? Is that general enough to include the fire road problem or potential problem? It wasn't evaluated, but she did indicate, the geologist did indicate that is a wedge of loose fill that I think she even indicated potentially unstable.
How about if I add, and an evaluation
Or
of...
if he didn't say that, I'll take it back, but it should be evaluated or considered.
An evaluation of unconsolidated fills related to the fire road?
That's a good term.
In their impact on the retaining walls.
Yeah, it doesn't really show up well in the survey. Look at the grades, the fire road.
Yeah.
Well, certainly on the map it does. Hard to see.
I'm talking about on the parcel.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I think I've got the gist of it.
All right. Is that a motion that you're making, Mr. Ramirez?
Yes, I will make that motion. With those conditions in the motion at the beginning would be that the Planning Commission, upon consideration of 10-year parcel map GLN 1619, and after reviewing the records, files, reports, and all documentary evidence and the administrative record submitted with regard to the said tentative parcel map, that the tentative parcel map number GLN 1619 is hereby approved subject to compliance with the State Subdivision Map Act, Title 16th of the Glendale Municipal Code, in the 14 additional conditions listed below, and the Planning Commission hereby makes each and all the following findings of fact.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion support. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jarreau?
Aye.
Commissioner Manukian?
Abstain.
And Chair King.
Aye, and a vote of 4-0 with one abstention. Tentative track map GLN 1619 has been approved. Would also note that there was a very nice model submitted as part of the hearing, so we're going to have to keep that. And I'm joking.
We'd actually much rather that they take it back with them.
No, I want that kept in your office, Mr. Hamilton, until the permit's issued.
Now, kudos to whoever did
Beautiful.
that model. It's a very excellent model.
All right, thank you.
They didn't show the slides.
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff, yeah.
Show a lot of trees.
We can go take the
No
plastic-
bare slopes.
Take the cover off and show the slide.
Obviously, they made that model in the spring or winter,
Right.
on a green.
made this in Philippines.
Well, I'm just talking about the green. All right, thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 6A, appeals.
Model building is being...
Is staff ready to go? Is there anything
Yes,
properly needed?
yes.
All right. Commission, all set to go? All right. We're going to item 6A, appeals. It's a standard variance case, number PVAR 2007-036. This was continued from April 16th, 2008. I'm looking for my... Oh, yeah. I have some prepared remarks before I continue introducing it. This is the procedures for appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Appeal hearings will be conducted in the following manner. The title of the matter before the commission shall be announced by the chairperson or staff, which I actually just did. Staff will then give a brief overview of the application and decision. The appellant or his or her representative will submit facts and statements relative to the appeal within a 15-minute time limit. Where the appellant is not the applicant or his her authorized representative will submit facts of statements within a 15-minute time limit. The chairperson may request the zoning administrator or zoning hearing officer to provide his or her rationale for the decision or ask other questions, and other individuals, if any, can speak within a 3 to 5 minute time limit at the discretion of the chairperson. The applicant, if not the appellant, may present a rebuttal within a 5-minute time limit, or I may designate the time limit, and rebuttals shall be limited to addressing only items discussed earlier in the public hearing. After testimony from all speakers, the chairperson will close the public hearing. No further testimony will be taken unless specific questions are directed by commissioners or unless the commission opens the public hearing. After deliberating, the commission will take one of 4 actions: find in favor of the appellant, find in favor of the zoning administrator, make no decision and remand the matter to the zoning administrator, or continue the matter. Any individual not satisfied with the commission's decision may file an appeal to the city council. This is done by filing a notice of appeal along with a filing fee at the Building and Safety Section Permit Services Center located on the first floor of the Municipal Services Building. An appeal must be filed within 15 days. So, again, this is standard variance case number PVAR 2007-036. The location is 2800 Montrose Avenue. It is an appeal of a denied standards and setback variance to permit or legalize the construction of a ground sign in the required front setback, and where a sign is not permitted in the R1650 medium-high-density residential zone, and the required minimum front yard setback is 20 feet in the R1650 zone. The appellant is David Mercer. Staff is represented by Rather Duong. Duong. Thank you, sir. I apologize for that, but everyone up here is getting quite used to my mangling of names. And a recommendation is that the motion be to sustain the zoning administrator's decision to deny. That said, can we have the staff overview?
Thank you, Chairman Kane and member of the commissions. As stated by you, this is case number PVAR 2007-036, which is a request for a standard and setback variance on a property located at 2800 Montrose Avenue. The property is located at the corner of Lambert Center and Montrose Avenue. The lot is irregular in shape, and it is about 62,000 plus square feet and has frontages on both streets. The frontage on Montrose is approximately 277 feet, and the frontage along Lambert Center is approximately 266 feet long. As shown on the site plan here, this is an 85-unit apartment complex, was developed in 1972, and the proposed location of the sign is right at the corner of these two of the intersection. The sign is 4 feet high, 8 inches, and with a width of 17 feet, 9 inches long, approximately 83 square feet in total square footage. If you can see on the zoning map, it is surrounded by numerous zones, including others R1650 zones. In the back, you have single-family zone. To the rear, also you have another multi-family zone, which is R2250. And across the street and at the northeast intersection, you have the C2 High District 1 zone. The zoning administrator considered the variance application in a public meeting on October 4, 2007. On November 19, 2007, the zoning administrator denied both requests, and on December 4, 2007, the applicant appealed the decision to the Planning Commission. The zoning administrator denial was based on a number of factors. Namely, first and foremost, the zoning administrator was unable to make the required findings as required by law to approve this variance. Second, the zoning administrator finds that the proposed sign is contrary to the objectives of the R1650 zone. Again, this is a multi-family zone. And approval of this variance would set precedent for other such requests potentially in the future. And to the zoning code, the front yard setback shall be fully landscaped and void of any structure. And by approving this sign, that is contrary to this goal as well to the zoning code. The appellant, however, contends that the zoning administrator overlooked the primary concern for safety to the building as well as to the building occupants. The appellant alleged that there have been 3 separate accidents where the proposed sign is located, and she will speak more to those accidents. And in your packet, there are 3 documents that speaks of the accidents, and also the appellant have prepared some additional information, including a list of petitions of the occupants and adjoining property owners that support of this sign. And also, you can tell in the photos, this photo here, which contains 4 pictures, were the photos that originally submitted to us with the application for the variance, and the other photos are much more recent, which were taken on April 23rd of this year, which showed that the sign actually, it's a banner that had been placed on the structure, and it should be actually a little bit different from what was proposed and shown to us previously. And that concludes staff presentation in this case. Any questions you have? And also there was an email from Wayne Cole, the senior traffic engineer, with the city of Glendale regarding their opinion and assessment of the safety at this intersection.
All right.
Could you describe the comments from the safety engineer?
Well, in the opinion of the senior traffic engineer, it says that the block wall is not traffic safety enhancement or protection device, and they have no position in this case one way or the other. And staff also met after the original meeting date, soon after April 16th, and met with Mr. Tom Mitchell as well as Mr. Wayne Cole and another staff member regarding the safety concerns at this intersection. And what was discussed or determined at that meeting is that this intersection is not known to be highly dangerous, and the design of the intersection is not any more dangerous than any other intersection in the city of Glendale.
And they were aware of the number of incidents at the site and didn't think that was considered dangerous?
That is a good question, Commissioner Jarrow. Staff in the traffic engineer department did a record search of traffic collision reports, and only one showed up, which was in 2002, and may coincided with one of the incidents that was specified by the appellant.
So a single car accident where it's not a collision?
It was a collision, a wrong turn collision.
But the other 2 incidents didn't show up in the traffic?
Correct. Staff in that department did perform a record search with the police department as well as in their department.
And would they have gotten a report of a solo vehicle running into a building typically? Or do they only get involved when multiple vehicles are involved?
That's a good question. I mean, my understanding, if it happens on public right-of-way, it would be required to be reported.
I have a question for Mr.
Yeah, please, Mr. Torgerson.
Do you have a copy of Chapter 30.16, Title 30, for the variance findings? I wanted to check the wording in the municipal code.
While you were checking on it, what you have in front of you in that draft motion is for CUP.
It's for a conditional use permit and not a variance, so...
So, in
I would
terms,
like, for the record, to have you read the 4 findings that need to be made for a variance approval. Mr. Duong, if you would, please.
Okay.
we'll make a copy
Finding
of
of facts.
the findings
Would you like me
for
to
the
read that,
variance.
or?
Yes.
Okay.
not necessarily the finding of facts, but the 4
Conditions, findings.
the 4 findings that need to be made.
That are essentially the same.
Okay.
It says, Chapter 30.43.030, Findings of Fact. A variance shall be granted only if the zoning administrator first finds that A, the strict application of the provisions of any such ordinance would result in practical difficulties.
That's CUP, not variance.
No, that's
That's the variance.
also.
That's the variance.
It is, all right, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Would you start over again on that one?
Okay. A, the strict application of the provisions of any such ordinance would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. B, there are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone or neighborhood. C, the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. And D, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Manu.
Looking at the pictures provided with the record, I'm looking at these copies. There seems to be a semicircular structure built around what seems to be 3 or more steel pipes that have been filled with concrete. If we should deny the appeal, what is to become of that wall? That is rebar reinforced.
It would need to be removed because that would be considered a wall just like any other wall located in
So the wall needs to be removed, but the
pipe, the bollards.
bollards,
B-O-L-L-A.
bollards, the bollards would have to remain, or could remain.
No, bollards in this case were treated as a
Part of the
structure.
wall.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff at this moment? All right, we've got 2 speaker cards. They're both part of the appellant's team, so you can split up your 15 minutes however you'd like.
Hello there, I'm Tracy Escalona. I'm here to represent David Mercer with RCMI. I am the portfolio manager of the property. In 2006, we took over ownership of the property, and at that time we did obviously notice the 8 metal ballards in the ground, or bollards. At that time we did research into why they were there. I knew why they were there personally. I've lived in the community for over 30 years and witnessed one of the accidents that happened in 2002. So after going through all the paperwork of the property, I found 2 other instances where this occurred also, and invoices, letters from residents, which I submitted to you for your review, that would show this was an accident that happened at this corner. I also submitted a map to you of the property with highlighted areas of unit number 28, 29, and 30, which would be at the very corner, and then the units number 69 and 85, which would be right above that, were directly affected by the specific accident in 2002. The first incident that occurred, according to the records I found of the property, was in 1981, and what I found at that point was a permit that was given from the city of Glendale to make the repairs to unit number 30, which is right there on that corner. Then you had those years pass where nothing obviously happened that we have record of, but 2002, we have record of the invoices and statements from the insurance company to make the repair to the stucco, the balcony, the windows, the screens, obviously the landscaping and all of that area. And at that time, the prior management company chose to install the metal posts that we started with. After reviewing all of this, we found a great need to provide our residents with a little bit more safety. Their safety was obviously our prime concern at this point because they, being that close to the edge of the street is a concern to us. We, being there all the time, see the major amount of traffic coming up and down the street. So at this time, what we decided to do was basically kill two birds with one stone and create the wall around the existing posts to put our name on it. At this point, we put up the wall just there, and that's when all of this started. We just put a banner up in the meantime right now. That's obviously very temporary, just to put our name up so people could find us. We were having issues with people locating the building. It is on a very prominent corner, but without a name there, when people are referred to the building or trying to find us, they were having a hard time. Obviously, I understand that with the staffing notes I was given at the last hearing in April, that having only 3 incidents that have occurred in 36 years is not that bad. But having it happen one time to the one resident that was there when it happened in 2002 was enough to make her move. And if I had had my family in that apartment when the sliding glass door came in and glass and everything else, obviously I would have moved too. So that is the basis for our request at this time, is to provide a safer place for our residents to live. We've done a petition of the residents and the surrounding areas for them to please, support our campaign. Of course, everyone did. We just went off of what was already existing with the metal posts, and at this point, the ownership, David Mercer, is willing to not even put our name on the sign. We just want some sort of extra barrier there to protect our building and our residents. If that is something that can be done, or there's recommendations, we would gladly like to satisfy the city and the commission as well. Because like I said, our main focus here is for the safety and welfare of our residents and for anybody else. One of the other variances is a setback. The building was built in 1972. At that time, it was granted a setback variance 5455S, granting them permission to build the property at a 15-foot from the property line. So we wouldn't even have the 20 feet necessary to build if we wanted to. The balcony of number 29, which is at the very corner, is only 7 feet from the sidewalk. So we didn't have a lot to work with. So that is something I would hope to have overlooked, just based on the fact that we don't really have any choice of where the building was placed in 1972. Again, I just would like, if there is recommendations for how we could satisfy the city. Sorry, I watched too much TV. To satisfy the city, that's our main goal, is to just do this to protect our residents. Our plan was to cover it in slate tile. As you can see, the pictures of before and after of what we've already done to the property to beautify it and to, make it a much more beautiful place to live for the residents and also for the community. We've added a lot of curb appeal, all new windows, of course, with a permit, and, to make this property shine. And our, like I said, adding the name to the sign was just basically just to put the name up somewhere. The sign that was there existing, which you can see in the pictures behind you, was very unstable and was on stilts basically, and when we had a very bad windstorm, it tipped over, so we had to eventually remove it completely. So that would be the basis for us wanting to do this, and I think that's all I have. I submitted all of the permits from 1981, invoices from the second time it happened in 2002, and then the third incident, which there was no record of, I understand, we did have a letter from the unit of number 29, which is a new resident, not there during the first incident. Apparently it was not something that required, repairs, except to just put the post back a little bit better. I think it wasn't any kind of structural damage at that time, so the post did serve purpose at that point. I have my resident manager here also and I also have a small video snippet just showing some of the heavy traffic. I had another one that was showed a better view of it, but this is the only one that was able to be shown on the formatted version. If we could show that.
Could someone kill the lights a little bit so we can
It's
pick
the
it
last
up?
one?
The last one?
Yeah.
The first two are your vacation.
There was me standing on corners several times trying to get the best shots. I'm sorry, rather. Okay, yeah, that was it. You should just show the traffic of how fast people are driving and how close it is to the building.
Want to show the other two?
You can, they're just not as... Okay.
Okay.
No, the one I had, the best one was...
She has 15 minutes.
Okay,
They
that's
can use it
okay.
however they want.
Okay.
I'll draw the line if we start using sock puppets.
In reviewing of all the notes, I understand that having a ground sign would be precedent setting, but that's why we're willing at this point to just not put our name on it. And if we have to shorten it in so it's not 17 feet long, we're willing to do that. Whatever it's going to take so that we can, and if we are going to landscape around it so that it's not going to show as much. I mean, we've already re-landscaped the entire property, so everything is all fully landscaped. If we have to add more, we're willing to do that, just so that we can have some sort of a barrier between the high traffic and, possibly prevent one more accident from happening that could potentially hurt our residents or anyone walking by. It's a very busy intersection right there. There's a 7-Eleven across from it. There's a church on the other corner, another mini mall to the east of us. So there is a lot of foot traffic as well as the bus stop right at the corners. So you have a lot of, pedestrians as well as my residents that we would like to protect. So I have Ashley Fiola. She's our resident manager who lives at the property, so she would like to be a little bit more.
Fine.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Fiola. As she mentioned, I'm the resident manager, which means basically I live on the property. I live in unit number 65, which is it's on the La Crescenta side of the street. And just as a resident, I can tell you that the traffic that is on that street, I know we're not here to discuss the traffic, but just to give you an idea, that traffic, that flow of the first video in which we looked at, that flow is pretty much a constant flow from early in the morning until wee hours of the night. And I can tell you that because that's the side of the house that my bedroom is on, so I hear it constantly. I have had the opportunity, because I took the petition around to my building, I had the opportunity to speak to several of the residents. They were in great support of us doing this. They appreciated the fact that we were trying to do something for, not so much for ourselves. I mean, they understand that, obviously, if it's permitted to put the name of our building on there, great. If not, it's just a matter of something between that constant flow of traffic and these people's home. The one lady that I spoke to, in which those bollards did stop the car, at the time, she and her young daughter were sitting on the couch. If there hadn't been a traffic barrier, that car would have come through and probably crushed her and her daughter. That spoke to me because I, too, am a mother, and, we spend a lot of time in our living room, and in an apartment, you don't have a whole lot of space to roam around and move around. You sit where you can sit. So I too appeal to the sense that we would just love to see this as another form of protection, prevention. I realize that, like you mentioned, there were accidents several years ago. Well, several years have passed. There are more cars on the road. There are a lot of kids on that corner. There are a lot of people that unfortunately use that 7-Eleven as a meeting ground, and then they peel out of that parking lot at all hours and peel out towards our corner. So we just are looking for another answer to, again, like Tracy mentioned, we're all in this together. If we need to change it up, we just would like to know what we can do to make it approved. So I thank you for your time.
Okay, questions for the appellant? I have a few. Whoever just, please. Okay, a couple things.
Sure.
What you're proposing shows to be 4 feet 8 inches high. What is it currently constructed at?
What, it is the same. That is exactly what the measurements are.
So what was the intention with the rebar and the bollards that are sticking up out of the concrete?
They just didn't finish it. We were in the process of doing that when...
What were they going to do? Build it higher, saw cut
No,
it
they were
off?
just going to finish it off and cover it with slate tile.
Okay.
We just went up as high as those bollards are. That's as high as we went. That's all we wanted to do was cover them because they were an eyesore. They were bright yellow. We were doing a huge landscape project at the time, all new landscaping, and so we wanted to enhance what we already had and, put something up to, like I said, enhance it and to put more of a traffic barrier.
So, and how did you get into the situation of building a wall and putting in a footing and doing all this stuff without checking with the city first?
Well, they intended my maintenance staff just to, with the ownership, he came, looked, and said, why don't we put, they just all started talking and doing. I wasn't involved in that process.
Caring about things like rules and
Well, we sure do,
laws
because we
and
got permits for
guidelines,
everything
so-
else. But
Right.
we just didn't anticipate, I honestly didn't realize what the regulations were for a sign. I didn't find out until this whole process started. I have a property at 3049 Montrose Avenue that I've been the on-site manager of for over 10 years and never had this happen out of all the things. So this was just brand new to us.
So who did the work for it? Was it a licensed contractor?
The posts were already there. Our staff that's on site, we do have a contractor at the time who was a contractor who spearheaded the project and put the, cinder block and rebar and the cement. I'm assuming there was some plywood at that time.
Right, because
And that's when
what
it
you
stopped.
built had no inspections, it's got no engineering, it wasn't done professionally. I mean, it looks like it'd hold up, but it's basically just something cobbled together.
Well, it looks like that now, yes, because it's already been like that for as long, and they didn't finish it. It was just stopped in the process.
Well, finishing,
I don't know
all
what there
finishing
would've-
does is hide what it does.
Right, but I don't know,
Lord
I
knows
honestly don't know
you
what stage they were even at this point, because I wasn't out there watching them, obviously, to see what the process takes. That's not my expertise.
I think, if I may,
Please.
I think what Chairperson Kane is trying to bring out is, if there is any basis to grant the appeal, it's for safety.
Yes.
Now, safety requires specific calculations, taking into consideration specific, and cars being the issue, the 3 accidents being the issue. Somebody has to sit down and figure out, okay, if a small little truck runs the light and plows into the wall, what size of a wall do we need? What kind of reinforcement do we need? How many of these bollards do we need in between the cinder blocks, and so on and so forth? So, in my opinion, and this can go to our discussions regarding whether the appeal should be granted or not. As far as I'm concerned, this, for all intents and purposes, could be a Pyrrhic victory for you. We could say, yes, we grant the appeal and your variance. But the flip side is, I, for one, would ask that this wall be torn down and rebuilt within, keeping in mind the, engineering requirements and specifications for this type of work.
Right.
And
That would be no
frankly,
problem, honestly.
that would be my...
that's-
I'm sorry, you have no issues at this point, sounds like you're basically on bended knee. That
Basically.
you'd tear out anything that was in there, and you'd rebuild with building permits, whatever was required, inspections and so on. You'd tear out what was in place and start over to do it right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is why we filed, as soon as we were stopped in the process, we were told we had to get a permit. I went immediately down here, filed to do that, and then it came to this point. So our intention from the get-go was to have it done correctly. We just took what was existing, which were the posts, 8 posts, and built around them. Those were done by the company before us, so I don't have record of how, how they did it. I have some invoices, but I don't have record of how deep it went. I think if I look through here, there was some notes for us how far down they went and, how those...
Was that work done with permits?
I didn't find any. I got the whole permit package.
Slap it in the box.
That was done in 2002, and I didn't find any, but it was the prior company, so I don't have record of that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Torgerson?
I was just going to ask Mr. Chair if there were was there further public commentary, or are we into the discussion?
No, I just had a question at this point. Now, there's still
I'll hold
a
my
path,
questions.
and it's pretty close.
I'll hold my comments until we're in the discussion phase.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any other questions for the speaker at this time? Okay, thank you very much. We have no other speaker cards. I guess I would just ask I'm sorry, Mr.
Well, I have a question for staff, but...
Well, that's why I'm going to ask staff for any closing comments and to be prepared for questions that we might have for them as well.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. Just to reiterate some of the points staff made earlier regarding the basis for the zoning administrator's denials, again, first and foremost, the zoning administrator was not able to make the required finding. That's the basis of approving any variances in the city. Second, it is precedent setting. I mean, in denying the request for this application is consistent with the purpose and objectives of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance contains standards intended to protect the public welfare and to preserve and enhance the quality of our neighborhoods. In all the residential zones throughout the city, it is the intent of the zoning ordinance to maintain a front yard setback clear of all structure. This is similar to our requirements and prohibition on the construction of gates, fences, walls, trellises over 18 inches high, and trellises in a front yard setback. Specifically, the underlying intent is to maintain a clear and attractive streetscape in the residential zone. Approval of a ground sign in any residential zone, including this one, would create the appearance of a commercial zone in a residential setting. This appearance would not be in the best interest of the general public, or would it foster the enhancement of the quality of our neighborhoods. That concludes my...
Thank you. Mr. Ramirez, you have a question?
Yeah. I'm looking at the required action prepared by staff, and it basically says that the standard setback variance is permitted to legalize construction of a ground sign. Now, this is more than a ground sign. It's really a barrier, a retaining wall, substandard it may be. But we're looking at a ground sign only, and the question is, if they remove the sign, we still have the barrier. Aren't we?
And there's a wall.
Are we looking at two items?
Correct. Right now, the request by the applicant since the beginning is to permit a ground sign. The appellant indicated in her presentation that she would be happy just to have a wall. In staff opinion, that is an entirely different application.
Exactly. We're talking about a ground sign, and we've been discussing to a large extent this barrier.
Correct. I would agree with you, Commissioner Ramirez. If that's the case, then a new application would need to be filed for a wall sign.
I don't agree with you. I think this is crazy to put these people through the mill like that.
I know it is, but this is what's before us.
Yeah, no, the sign was incidental to the wall behind it. They may talk about a ground sign, but we're talking about a thin little sign. The issue is that wall.
Yes.
However they parse it in terms of calling it ground sign, what we're dealing with is that wall. And however we deal with it, whether we tell them to no-go or whether we do it with conditions, I think this is something we can act on and not just say, oh, resubmit. That's my opinion.
Well, I think the zoning administrator is here, and I would like a clarification of that.
Hey, we brought in all the power. We've got planning director now, zoning administrator.
May I make a comment?
Please.
Mr. Chairman. We could grant a variance subject to a bunch of conditions that would mitigate all your concerns.
Include the sign, yeah.
Which is kind of the
Or
direction
not even
I'd like to
include
work
sign.
on.
Preclude the sign. My comments, unless you have another.
Well, we're still asking questions of staff.
Oh, you're right.
At this point.
Well, we're talking about the issue, what, on paper here, what we're reviewing here is or deliberating on is ground sign, and it's really more than a ground. I fully agree that that it's really the wall or the barrier that we're looking at, but I want just clarification of what the zoning administrator denied.
It would be interesting to hear how this morphed from the ground sign to a safety barrier.
Right, that's what I'm at.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, at the original zoning administrator's hearing, the discussion was around accessory ground sign, which is what's presented in the drawings and at the picture. That's why at the last meeting, when you continued this case to give the applicant a chance to bring additional information regarding accidents that happened at that intersection, I mentioned to you very clearly that that was not even a part of my consideration when I made the decision. I was looking at this as a pure accessory ground sign because it was not also mentioned at the public hearing that they're willing to remove the sign. So, or just to keep it as a wall. The whole discussion centered around the fact that this is being proposed as an accessory ground sign. And also, just for point of clarification or information, I think the applicant mentioned the variance that was granted. The property already enjoys that benefit of having a less setback, because had the building been constructed without the variance, it would have been much, much further back, which is 25 feet in 1972. It was the original owner who applied for a reduced setback, which brought the building closer to the street than required by code. So that's the benefit they're already enjoying. Now, I think the applicant also asked if there's anything that the city can tell them they can do. If this wall is reduced to 18 inches in height, that's something that they may be, but I'm not sure it will serve the purpose they're requesting now, which is for safety reason or to act like a barrier, but we can allow 18 inches in height up to the property line only to serve like a little garden or planter type of wall. Other than that, if she removes the sign, this will be considered a wall or a fence, and what we advertised was for an accessory ground sign. But this would be of a lesser request if the sign portion itself is removed, and therefore just having the wall remain as the wall or a fence.
Good observation.
A question maybe from somebody, the existing Sunset Ridge sign with the phone number, is that, I didn't see it go to the site, is that
It's a banner.
banner?
Yes,
Or,
it's a banner.
It's a temporary sign, which is apparently allowed.
well, how come it doesn't look like a banner on one of the photos? It looks like it's about an inch thick.
Oh, it's not, I think I drove by it today and it wasn't there now. It's a banner.
It's on something fairly thick. That may just be backer for it.
It looks like plywood or something.
It's on some sort of backer.
A banner on plywood or what is it?
It's framed.
So if they remove this sign completely,
Well, and that takes care of one of the two
That's-
variances. That takes care of the sign variance.
right,
Then it's a wall within a setback area.
that's another issue, and of course, the issue of whether they can allow 18 inches, that's allowed by code, obviously, and anyway, I just wanted clarification on the sign, and now we know it's a banner on some kind of a board or something that's fairly thick. That can be removed, and the issue is gone,
As far as the sign is
as
concerned.
far as the sign is concerned. Then we have the so-called retaining structure or barrier to deal with.
Okay. Any other questions for staff from any of the commissioners?
The record that was presented to us does not include that. Never mind, it does.
The original?
Yes.
Let me ask about the bollards and the installation of the bollards. Were those done under permitted conditions? Are those allowed in a setback area?
Staff searched the building permit packet for that as well, and I did not show or find anything that addressed the bollard. And that would require permit, and again, that is considered a structure that is not that are not allowed in the setback.
Yeah, and I thought when you read through the list of things that were allowable and or not allowable in a setback area, I didn't specifically hear bollards, but I heard similar terms such as fences, and
Correct.
I guess they would be considered in that regard. And then I do go back to the traffic department, traffic and transportation division analysis, I guess. In their opinion, the block wall is not a safety enhancement or protection device. Do you know what the basis of that opinion was? Is that just based on visual inspection or looking at the photographs or description? On what basis did they determine that it's not a safety protection device?
I believe it was a combination of what you just mentioned, and also it also based on, I guess, the experience in terms of people driving habit. I mean, an accident could happen anywhere. Again, they studied this intersection and other intersections just like this one throughout the city, and this intersection is no different or any more dangerous than the other intersections that's heavily used anywhere else.
Other than the history of incidents.
Correct.
Which they may or may not have been aware of.
I had a question. The traffic division, basically I would submit that the email from the traffic division should not be considered simply because it finishes with the statement that we have no position in this case one way or another. Our opinion is that a block wall is not a traffic safety enhancement. First of all, is that even within the jurisdiction of the Traffic and Transportation Division? Do they do safety analyses?
Well, they do in a sense that when an applicant proposes a sign, whether it's a ground sign, a sign on the wall of a commercial building or a certain business, Traffic and Transportation staff reviews the sign for visibility, whether the sign may block traffic movements or vehicle traffic, or maybe whether the sign is a distraction to drivers.
Exactly, that's exactly my point. So they don't have the jurisdiction to study it in terms of it forming a barrier to a car plowing through it. They can tell me whether a given sign hanging on a given building will be distracting to the passers-by and the drivers-by. But they can't tell me that a wall has to be X feet long and X inches wide, built with XYZ material in order to provide a safety barrier against a vehicle.
Correct, Mr. Manukian, you
All right.
stated correctly.
Okay.
That would be in the jurisdiction of the Building and Safety Division.
That's right.
Although a wall of this size would not require a building permit if it's under 6 feet.
Sorry, say that again, please.
Walls under 6 feet high do not require a building permit.
But they have to meet zoning code requirements as far as setback and
Sure,
location is concerned. Okay.
Okay.
Right. So the fact that they don't have a permit is not an issue
For us to consider, per se.
for us to consider, right?
Although it can
The fact
be-
that the wall's within the
You
setback.
might want to keep that in mind when you're designing, if you choose to fashion conditions about checking for engineering, because there isn't going to be an engineering check.
Unless we ask for it.
Unless we
If the
condition.
building, if no building permit is required, the building division can review it.
We could still require a licensed structural engineer to design an appropriate barrier wall.
And then who would check that?
Yeah.
You're relying on the license of a licensed structural engineer.
That's an interesting thought. It's kind of a interesting situation.
See, the only, discussing it now?
Well, let's just, we bounce in and out of that, but let's just, are there other questions directly for staff? We can certainly ask more questions of staff as we deliberate, but are there any specific questions for staff prior to that?
I have a question on the motion that's in the, and I'm talking about the first motion, which is to sustain the decision of the zoning administrator. Is that motion pertain only to, what does that pertain to? The sign itself plus the wall, or the sign only?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if you will look at my November 19, 2007 decision, it gives you the description of the application that I approve, and it says the application for standards and setback variance to construct a ground sign in the required front setback and where a sign is not permitted. And the standards variance, again, is for the ground sign, and the second item is located within the front yard setback.
There's two specific municipal codes that the variance applies to.
Ground sign, meaning that it's attached to the ground somehow, doesn't mean...
Right, a ground sign can be a low wall sign, a high sign on a pole.
The sign itself is not attached to the ground.
So it can be a monument type of sign.
Okay.
All right, no other questions for staff. We will close the public hearing and move to deliberations, formally. So, who cares to share their views first?
Well, I can, read my notes. I don't want to get all picky and legal, because I know these good folks just did what they thought was right. They did what they thought they had to do to protect the property and also have a nice sign on the front of the place instead of having a cardboard sign on the side of the building. Unfortunately, they ran afoul of the municipal codes, and the strict application of the municipal codes, in my mind, I would not be able to make all the 4 findings required to grant a variance. So I would have to sustain the zoning administrator's judgment on this. The intent of the ordinance of no signs is very clear, that the reason the ordinance the reason the ordinance was put into effect is that the city council and the city of Glendale didn't want ground level signs around buildings anywhere in the city, and there's nothing vis-a-vis a sign that's unique to this property that is different than any other property. So that's unfortunate, but that's just the way the law is written, and that was the intent of the ordinance, so I wouldn't be able to make that finding. The objective of having a structure in the front setback, which would require a variance for the sake of safety, and maybe you could make the argument that that's an unusual corner, and so it is a situation that the drafters, the people that wrote the municipal code, couldn't have foreseen, so therefore it is worthy of an exception. I could make a finding like that. But then my problem is that I'm not so sure that wall is really safe. So if it was a well-engineered wall, and if you had a professional engineer and the traffic department that said that structural design or a structural design in the front setback was going to achieve the objectives of protecting the apartment building and simultaneously not causing a potential additional hazard to surrounding properties, like somebody hits the wall and instead of hitting the apartment, he caroms off the wall into the gas station across the street, causes a huge explosion. That's the reason that they tend to want to have professional engineers, licensed engineers, spend the money and have a licensed engineer draw up the plans, and then you know you're safe. The city doesn't feel badly giving you a variance because they figure that they're covered because the engineer's licensed, and it's just a much better way of going about it all around. And so if we could figure out how to craft words for that, I wouldn't be adverse to granting a variance for a structure in the front setback if the following conditions were met, and no sign except for the provision for temporary signs when there's an apartment for rent, which seems fair.
Or for sale.
Or for sale, if it's condos. Anyway, Mr. Chair, that's my
All right.
2 cents worth.
I have to say that, and I appreciate those comments, and I understand the application of the code. I do think that we're a discretionary body in some fashion, a deliberative body, and I'd like to be able to apply what I would hope would be common sense to the problem that's before us and find a way to overcome the issues of findings. And as I look at the necessary findings that are required, I think I could probably make an argument with regard to each of them and why I think I'm capable at least of making those findings. I do believe that if I were able to do that as a condition of that approval, I would want a licensed engineer to look at the standards for such a wall and have that wall actually engineered and built in accordance with those requirements. So it would be in some ways a conceptual or theoretical approval, not necessarily of this particular wall, but of some sort of traffic safety device. I do think that despite what the traffic division may believe, this appears to be a significantly unsafe corner. My sense on the first of the findings is the strict application would result in practical difficulties. Well, to my mind, the practical difficulty is that back in 1972, a variance was granted that essentially eliminated a setback area. And so the practical difficulty is there simply isn't any space where a traffic safety device could be installed that isn't within the setback.
Yeah, without a variance.
Yeah. So I think that is a practical difficulty. The exceptional circumstance, to my mind, is in fact the number of incidents and the obvious safety hazard that exists. The third finding has to do with the public welfare, and I would suggest that the installation of some sort of safety device in this location would actually improve the public welfare and not be a detriment to it. So I don't think that's a hard one to make at all. The final one is that it's not contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. I think, in general, the objectives of the ordinance are to protect the public health and safety, and this is clearly in that line. So I could make those arguments, and in fact would. Having done so, I would say that I would condition an approval for this type of structure that it be based on an engineering analysis and built to the specifications of an engineer for this purpose. And whether it needs to be right at the property line or set back 2 or 3 feet within the property line, and the size and nature of it, I would leave to the discretion of someone whose expertise is in that regard.
Very good.
Basically, I would like to echo a couple of things said by my fellow commissioners. I would add, however, that anything that I would vote in favor of would include that this particular wall be torn down as it is now and rebuilt. But I do have, but I am facing a dilemma. 2 of them, actually. Number one, if the sign is to come down, if the wall is to come down and it is to be rebuilt as per the specifications of an engineer, the city would have no way of checking on that, it would appear. And that makes me feel uncomfortable. Not so uncomfortable that I couldn't go forward with this, because at the end of the day, and I think the owners of the building are fully aware of this, their liability remains. Regardless of who checks off on the final project, they are still liable. If a car plows into the apartment that's right behind the current wall, they will be sued. So I'm very comfortable that they will do the best they can to build a tank-proof wall there. I'm almost very confident of that. Insofar as the signage is concerned, again, I have a dilemma. There's talk that we shouldn't have a sign maybe there because it will basically bring down the level of the neighborhood. Signs can be built in various shapes or sizes, different tastes and quality and material. The problem with that is if we tell them that they have to bring down a sign and whatever sign they have to build would have to satisfy some standard, I can't think of anybody who would actually check on that standard because I don't think this is a design review matter. So there, I'm not that confident that the quality measures would be taken. So that's the long way of saying that I would be in favor of granting the appeal premised on the condition that the current wall be torn down, rebuilt to the specifications of a civil engineer, and that no sign be on that wall. So basically all it is a wall, and they can pretty much build it as long as it meets an engineer's specs. We're good to go.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question on your, one of the conditions is no sign be placed on this so-called new wall structure. Are you referring to temporary signs as well? Because the code does allow temporary signs.
Well,
temporary meaning, I don't know what that means, but temporary for rent or for sale signs
are allowed.
Are allowed in front of a rental
yes,
property,
what is,
not necessarily on the wall.
Right.
Correct. Real
They
estate
can-
signs are allowed, but there's a size limitation. I believe it's 6 square feet.
well, it's still 6 square feet.
But we could
can
limit as a
condition that.
condition of approval that temporary
but not-
signs shouldn't be allowed or shall not be allowed on this particular wall.
And Mr. Manukian is correct in stating that it could not be on the wall, because if it's attached to the wall, it will be a wall sign, one, or it could be a building identification sign, and those two signs have different
Conflict.
requirement.
Okay.
It'll say wall.
Well, my position is that the burden of proof to make these findings is on the applicant, and the applicant hasn't, in my opinion, has not established the burden of proof for the findings, so I cannot, I'll have to sustain the zoning commissioner's, zoning administrator's decision denying the setback variance.
Thank you. Sorry?
I had a further comment pursuant to the idea of the intent of the ordinance. I think the intent of the ordinance to limit walls in the setback area, particularly on corners, is just to preserve sight lines down the street. And this particular wall is pretty high. It's higher than it might need to be an effective traffic barrier.
That's actually something I was
Because the effective traffic barriers that you see on the freeway are shorter than this desk. There's ugly concrete things. So you could preserve the intent of the ordinance as far as preserving the sight lines and the views if you constructed something that was specifically designed just to be a traffic barrier. It would cost less because it doesn't have to be as high. It could be shaped properly so that vehicles wouldn't
See, the problem with
bounce
that,
off it, which is with the design of traffic barriers.
the problem is whatever motion we draft right now would be done,
Unenforceable.
it's unenforceable. And on top of that, we can't even have it checked later. Usually we can say, do it as per the requirements of such and such division, or this engineer, or the city arborist, or whatever. We can basically leave it to another city official to come back and make sure that our general intent that it be done by certain guidelines be followed. Here, we literally have to fly blind and leave it to their discretion.
So we'd have to basically deny both of these, then they could go out and build what the engineer build what they thought was an appropriate structure without a permit because it's below 6 feet, and then hope they don't get called out.
They can do it
They
below
can't go
6
over
feet,
18.
but they can't do it because of setback requirements. See, if we tell them to tear down the wall, Mr. Gorbachev, they can't do it because of the setback various requirements.
Yeah, they would need a variance to be able to build a wall in the first place, but we can't condition approving a wall because it's unenforceable because it's going to be less than 6 feet.
Well, no,
There's kind of a catch-22.
Well, there are some paths that we can take. So let me make a couple comments, and then we can continue with our back and forth. First off, I think that the original application for variance was not just for a ground sign. They talk about a traffic barrier / ground sign. So one of the things that always irritates me is when we go through this negotiation process and somebody goes in front of the zoning administrator with a scheme, it gets shot down, and suddenly they say, oh, well, let me try this scheme, and maybe I can sell it to the zoning board, and if that doesn't work, I'll sell it to the city council. I don't believe this was the case. I do think what happened is the zoning administrator in their hearing focused on the ground sign issue and forgot that there's this big wall behind the sign, where we're focusing on the wall behind the sign and are reacting to the safety concerns that have been presented. Frankly, a ground sign, a wall sign, a sign, whatever, you want to attach the word in front of sign would be DOA. There's no way it's going to pass. It is contrary. And the zoning administrator people made the exact right decision when they denied the ground sign. Now, that said, I think the applicant, in their appeal, has provided, at least 3 instances with varying levels of proof, but at least 3 instances where vehicles have plowed into, that relative area of the building. I think there is a risk for the tenants in that building, and I think all of us, certainly, up on this dais would not want to be the people to turn down something and find out a car plowed in there next week and somebody got, hurt or worse. So, I want to work through what we can do to provide safety for the people that are renting those apartments. First off, one of the conditions, and I'm kind of going back and forth on different things, one of the conditions I would suggest, and I think we were talking about it, is no temporary signs, no for rent signs, no nothing, post no bills, nothing goes on that barrier. Okay? The second thing is that it would need to be more than likely torn out and done properly. And by properly, I would expect that a structural engineer would engineer the appropriate reinforcing and wall thickness and foundation for that barrier, and that same structural engineer would be responsible and hired to be responsible for monitoring the actual construction. Thirdly, that structural engineer's drawing and an affidavit from that structural engineer be presented to the zoning board just to put into the file. Not for review, but just to have for reference, so that if something pops up in the future, we can point to the structural engineer's license and his insurances and so on as it relates to the barrier wall. I wonder if we need to slip in, since we have no legal counsel, I wonder if we need to slip in something about the apartment owner indemnifying the city for this wall.
Yeah, that's why I'm a little uncomfortable with not having Mr. Garcia.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll talk about asking them to make findings for us, and next month we can finalize it. But I want to find out about indemnification of the apartment owner toward the city if this barrier wall gets voted on. Okay, beyond that, the barrier wall needs to be engineered. It's too tall. 4'8", too tall. You probably can get away with 30 inches, maybe 3 feet, but it should be no more than 3 feet. I lean toward 30 inches. Okay? That's going to stop a car. May not stop a bus, between the curb and the 30-inch wall and give the bus a nice, bit of lift to look like something out of Speed. But shorter wall, I don't know about the length. I mean, I can't really judge that, so I'm prepared to say the length is fine where it is, as long as it's less obtrusive. Because right now, it's a barrier. And by that, I mean, it's just a barrier to the view. It's blocking the view of the apartment building. It's blocking the view of your tenants looking out. So let's make the thing shorter. And the second thing is I think it should probably be clad in stucco so that it's more attractive.
I would say a couple of things in that regard. One, I don't know that I'm prepared to, in some ways, prescribe the size of the wall, length or height. I would leave that to whatever licensed engineer we defer this to. I do agree that the materials and the color should be consistent with the building itself.
Well, just from professional experience, not engineer professional, but construction professional, you're going to be able to come up with something that's, could stop a tank at 3 feet. Well, I'm not so sure about 30 inches, but at 3 feet, you're stopping tanks. That's K-rail height, if you will, on the freeways. So, and an engineer can make something extremely strong and do the job at 3 feet high. I just don't want to see us opening it up and suddenly find out that it's, 3 feet 6, 4 feet, 4 foot 8. The way it is now, it's too tall. So I would condition it as being no more than 3 feet. And I'd actually like to see 30 inches. But I'm willing to, give a certain amount of flexibility to the potential engineering.
Well, I'm a little leery also about going into the specifications for a design wall. That's really engineering. And I think if whoever makes the motion, it probably can be a somewhat generic. And as far as length and height,
I think the key point would be as short and or as tall as necessary, but no more so, or as short as possible to do the job.
Well, yeah. What is the purpose? The purpose for what? It's a restraining wall for traffic, and I think an engineer can take that and
you want it short enough so that you're not blocking the view of pedestrians and bicyclists coming around the corner on their bikes on the sidewalk. So that's why we don't want a 5-foot sign.
I think we're going way over.
Strollers.
Question from the staff.
Small dogs.
Mr. Planning Director, are you telling me that there's not a single department in the city that reviews and authorizes and examines this issue of traffic barriers?
We're not saying that. We are saying that the applicant claims that the reason for what was originally applied for as a sign is to create a safety wall. And if in fact the purpose is to create a safety wall, there has not been any kind of analysis that shows that, for number one, I think they have made some claims that the traffic that is generated in that intersection creates a higher possibility for incidents of cars running into the building. However, no analysis has been shown to say that the kind of barrier would be a wall as opposed to a bollard or any other kind of means, and that what the strength of the wall should be to provide that kind of protection. If in fact they do that kind of an analysis, we do have the expertise in the city to actually send those to other departments and say, number one, is the assumption correct? Number two, is the proposed wall sufficiently strong enough to prevent that kind of assumption to give the kind of protection? So that kind of analysis has never been produced. In fact, the application was for a sign and a traffic barrier at the same time. So.
My simple question, if you tell me that the name of the department,
yes,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and I'm going to suggest to my fellow commissioners to deny this appeal and to suggest that the appellant go to that department and begin this process the way it ought to have been done in the first instance. The best way of doing things is not to go through a long appeal process and then to have a bunch of commissioners cobble together a bunch of requirements. If we can do it right, as if none of this happened, of course it did, but if you tell me what department could handle that, we'll take it from there.
Mr. Chair, Member Manukian, building and safety will only require the applicant to submit a signed and sealed structural drawings for that wall. We are not gonna design it or check it for them. If an engineer submits a drawing saying, I'm putting my name and signature on this drawing saying that this will withstand a tank or a truck or something, that's their responsibility. So they will submit that. If you approve any wall or any kind of wall to be within that front setback area, they will submit it to us, and in turn we will just process it through the building and safety. They may look at it as far as engineering is concerned, but they're not saying this is enough strength, or they're not going to do any analysis. So Building and Safety Permit Services Center will be the one that's going to issue them the permit. Although, as we mentioned earlier, anything less than 6 feet in height, Building Department does not require a permit. The only reason we're here is because this did not meet zoning code setback requirement. That's it.
If I may add, another, you said for the experts, so building and safety. In addition, if the presumption is that the particular circumstances associated with this intersection generate a higher possibility of traffic incidents that could have an impact on the building, we would need to get transportation and traffic input in that to see, in fact, if that assumption is something that they could say, yes, we think there are special circumstances here that should be taken into account.
One more. There was also a question as far as liability.
And I'll give Hassan a chance to rebut you after this, Edith.
Okay, liability. If the wall is completely within the private property, contained within, we have nothing to worry as far as liability.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if there's a possibility.
And I don't necessarily agree with that statement, because we as a board are allowing them to do something. The city is allowing them to do something.
Well,
It's still worthy of asking legal.
We will look into that.
Mr. Torgerson.
No, I was thinking one possibility would be to continue this until such time as the applicant came back with a set of plans that were done by a certified engineer that we were comfortable with, and then we could say, well, based on that, we'll grant the variance for the setback and not for the sign.
Then we have something in front of us. Your thoughts, Sean?
And what do we do with the existing wall in the meantime? Allow it to be there as an eyesore? As a temporary?
Well, we're
continuing. We'd have to.
I would be uncomfortable having them remove it in the first instance, right now.
I agree.
You don't want it removed yet.
I don't want it removed. I would like the sign removed. You know, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I think in the course of remanding, if we make some verbal representations like we are, that the fact that the sign isn't going to get approved, and if you want to clear the good graces of the city and boards, it should probably disappear pretty quickly when it comes back after this has been continued. I bet they'll listen to it. Any other thoughts? So would this be a continuation, or should we remand?
I'd like to see continuation.
Well, why can't we break it down into two parts? Deny the sign or rather sustain the...
deny the sign and then continue.
The wall is a different issue completely, and it may not even have to come here.
And we feel like we've done something.
I have to disagree that the wall is a different issue. I think the application was for a traffic barrier sign. It was clearly indicated on the application, traffic barrier/sign.
No, I mean, a different issue is it's the appeal, we can actually break it down into the sign per se, and then the retaining structure for safety. That's the intent. Although they're connected, I see them as
I don't
separate.
know. Yeah, I don't know that we can make a motion to reject and continue the balance. I'm just not sure if we can do that.
Well, there's two variants.
Order-wise. I think there's just one.
Two ordinances, a sign ordinance And a wall and a...
standards variance, but it's under one application.
Well, that's why.
It'd be nice if Mr. Garcia would pipe in.
Where is Mr. Garcia? He's usually here.
But,
So you have assistant city attorney.
you know what, we're going to do that. That's just what we'll do. We're going to break it up. We're going to have a motion on the standards variance, and then we'll have a motion to continue the setback variance portion. We're going to do it. And if we're wrong, we'll find out in the future when Mr. Garcia or someone else from legal points out the errors of our
Maybe
ways.
that'll inspire him to come next week.
Yeah, I don't know that it merits risking a potentially not extra legal action, but an action that may not be sustainable.
Let's do it this way.
Let's just, I mean, is the sign so
I'm going
significant?
to reopen the public hearing. I'm going to ask the appellant to come up and answer one question
And
for
say,
me.
remove the sign.
Right.
His hand up.
And you know where you're going. If we continue this without necessarily working on the ground sign aspect today, but it may embroil us in legal parsing, are you going to take down the sign tomorrow or in the next week?
I'm going to take it down tomorrow.
Okay, and you'll keep it down until we get
Yes.
together. All right.
Problem.
Fair enough on that. If we continue and so on. All right.
With that, I would move.
All right, thank you.
Close it.
Well, now we'll close the public hearing and continue with our...
I would move continuation of this item to a date to be determined pending submittal from the applicant, or the appellant in this case. Licensed, drawings are from a licensed engineer for a traffic barrier in this location.
I would, go ahead. Sorry?
And I was going to make the suggestion to the applicant that if they don't know where to find a licensed engineer for such a job, look around the room. The other side of the, specifically to your left.
Are you acting as a broker now?
Yeah, brokering.
And
Maybe a
as
source of advice
as
on where
a
you can find somebody like
continuation to the amendment, I would say that you should consider the comments in terms of coverings, height, I'm sorry?
Aesthetics.
The aesthetics of it, minimizing height and so on. That's going to go a long way toward making this palatable to those of us that may still be on the board in the next few years when you come back.
Or not.
Yeah, we're getting some rotation over the next few months. So. All right.
Yeah.
Is that suitable for you to?
Continue,
all right.
huh?
We have a motion.
Support.
And support. Would you call roll, please?
When you find the expert.
I'm just wondering if we need to bring this back with revised findings for you.
Well, right now it's continued.
Oh, you're continuing the whole thing?
Yeah, yes,
I thought you were going to try to approve or
No.
deny
No.
part.
But it would be useful, I would suggest, that the
So,
staff
we'll do
prepare
roll call?
a motion that has revised findings
Well, they probably, that's
for the
fine.
continuation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And by the way, the item was noticed with the two pieces, both contained in the notice, therefore you can bifurcate your decision if you'd like to, separate the two pieces if you'd like.
But you're not going to do that tonight?
We're moving on.
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna look for good faith on the part of the appellant.
Okay.
Because I'm one of those cars that drive by that house at a high rate of speed, or that apartment building.
Now you can
Within the speed limit, but a high rate nonetheless.
And it was a motion by Commissioner Guerrero and seconded by Manukian.
Mr.
Okay.
Manukian.
The roll call is Commissioner Ramirez,
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Yes.
Commissioner Giroux,
Aye.
Commissioner Manukian,
Aye.
and Chair Kane.
Aye, on a vote of 5-0, case number PVAR 2007-036, 2800 Montrose Avenue, is continued to a date uncertain.
Essentially, this is sustaining.
Off calendar, if you will.
Really.
Okay.
We just push through.
Well, that was interesting. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 8A. It's tentative track map 70325. The location is 3000 Montrose Avenue. It's APN 5610-008-0026. It's a request to subdivide a proposed new-story multifamily development consisting of 3 condominium units over 2 two-car garages, and 1 3-car garage in the R1650 medium high-density residential zone. The project is deemed categorically exempt from CEQA. The applicant owner is Gregory H. Frame. Staff is represented by Bradley Collin, and we have a motion to approve tentative trap map. The recommendation is for the commission to approve the tentative trap map. Mr. Collin, I'm sorry.
You did such a good job.
I know.
Mr. Chairman, members
So
of the...
proud of myself.
You're hired. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, as mentioned, Greg Craven is proposing to subdivide a proposed 4,802 square foot, 2-story residential multifamily building for condominium purposes. The proposed project will entail construction of 3 residential units in the R1650 medium to high density residential zone. No building permit has been issued for this project to date. The project will entail the demolition of 1 single-family house and a detached garage. Subject site is located on the southwest corner of Montrose Avenue and Ramsdale Avenue. The site is surrounded by multifamily zoning. In the immediate area, there is 2- and 3-story multifamily buildings. Vehicular access to the project will come from both Montrose Avenue and Ramsdale. Montrose Avenue is identified as an urban collector, presently improved 37-foot wide roadway and a 90-foot right-of-way. Ramsdale Avenue is identified as a community collector and is presently improved with a 21-foot roadway and a 60-foot wide right-of-way. The subject project was approved by the Design Review Board on August 10th, 2006, and staff is recommending approval of the subject tentative tract map, subject to compliance with the State Subdivision Map Act, Chapter 16.16 and 16.28 of the Title 16 of the Glendale Municipal Code, and the attached conditions. Concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for questions. The applicant is in the audience.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from the commission for staff?
I had one, let me find it. Regarding parking, to what is the cutoff point for code to require guest parking?
4
Guest
units.
parking.
Guest parking, 4 units.
4?
So once you get to 4 units, then 1 space is required.
Okay. Doesn't matter how large the 3 units are then, huh?
No.
Okay.
All right, I have 1 speaker card. Surprisingly enough, it's Hayek Martirosyan.
Thank you, Chairman Kane and Commissioner. Just for the record, Hayek Martirosyan, I'm the tract engineer. I have no comments. I will. We read the condition. We comply fully with the conditions, and we are asking for your blessing. If you have any question, be more than happy.
Our blessing, all right.
Thank you.
There's no signs on this property?
There's no signs, no. It's interesting.
Let the record show we've passed 7:30 in meeting time, hence the frivolity. Thank you, Mr. Martirosyan. No questions, I take it? Seeing none. Any further comments from staff?
None, sir.
Seeing none. Comments from commissioners, or entertain a motion, please?
No letters opposing or for?
No letters received,
Whatever.
opposition, or in favor. Or phone calls or emails.
Left side's been doing all the work tonight, gentlemen. Somebody on the right side like to make a motion?
Find it. I'm tired.
I'll move. Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that upon consideration of tentative tract number 70325 and after reviewing the records, files, and reports, and all documentary evidence submitted with regard to said tentative tract, that tentative tract number 70325 is hereby approved, subject to compliance with the appropriate Map Act and municipal code listed in the written motion in 26 It actually says 27, and then it says parentheses 26, so we'll have to change that motion. How many conditions are there? 26. Okay, change the written motion to read 26, parentheses 26. Additional conditions listed below.
A second, then.
A motion and support by Mr. Menuchyan. I think he beat you by a nanosecond, Mr. Ramirez. Would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jerome?
Aye.
Commissioner Menuchyan?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye, on a vote of 5-0, tentative track map number 70325, 3000 Montrose Avenue is approved. We'll move on to agenda item 8B, tentative track map 70146 at 124 West Colorado Street. It's APN 5641-001-008, 021, and 022. It's a request to construct 34 new residential condominium units on a 22,000 square foot site located in the DSP, Downtown Specific Plan Zone, Transitional District. Design Review Board adopted the mitigated negative declaration on February 15, 2007. The applicant is Pacific Town Center Development, LLC. Staff is represented by Roger Keisel, and there's a recommendation that Commission approve the tentative track map.
I had the same problem.
Yeah, Peter Cooper.
Actually, after all that, I'd like to request about a 5-minute break to post the plans.
All right, fair enough.
Very good.
We'll be in recess for 5 minutes. I thought he was going to continue. Okay, we're back in session. It is the May 21st, 2008 City of Glendale Planning Commission meeting. We're moving on to agenda item 8B, tentative track map 70146, which I previously read into the record. We're now ready for staff to proceed with their presentation.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. The next item before you this evening is tentative track map 70146, a request to construct 34 new condominium units on an approximately 22,000 square foot site in the DSP, Downtown Specific Plan Zone. It's in the Transitional District. The project site is located at 124 West Colorado Street. The plans for the project are posted on the board behind you. As I previously mentioned, the site is located in the DSP Zone, Transitional District, and has a general plan designation of also DSP. The property is surrounded by the Town Center Specific Plan and the Americana to the north. The zoning, again, DSP and motel and commercial uses are located to the east and west of the project. And then R1650 and multifamily residential development is located south of the project. The site has approximately 50 feet of frontage along Colorado Street and 100 feet of frontage on Elk. It's approximately 295 feet deep. The project site is flat. All units will be one level, containing between 1,300 and 1,500 square feet of living space, and include 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. 78 parking spaces are contained in the subterranean garage. The Design Review Board approved the project on May 15th of last year, 2007. The project is consistent with the general plan elements as outlined in the staff report. The site is physically suited for the proposed type of development. Based on this evidence, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve tentative track map 70146 with the attached 34 conditions. That concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions of me?
Any questions for staff at this moment?
How many of these are affordable housing units?
None are proposed.
Well,
Are they going to sell less or more than the Americana units?
That I wouldn't know.
Sorry, that was me.
This isn't a redevelopment area, is it not?
It is not, no.
It's in the DSP.
the other side of the street.
But not in
DSP,
the,
but not in the redevelopment.
Yeah,
So there's-
it's,
There's no affordable housing assessment required either.
And actually, there's no affordable housing in the central redevelopment project, just because it was established early enough.
After the law
By
was
zoning in
changed.
San Fernando Road area.
so gentlemen, you'll be surprised to know that we have one card from the omnipresent Ike Martirosian.
Just for the record, Ike Martirosian, I'm tract engineer. Read the conditions again, I have no comments. We concur with the staff recommendation, and we will fully comply with it. If you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any further remarks from staff?
I do not have any aside from the correction to the motion. We just need to add the number of conditions.
On conditions, can I ask you, because I didn't read them all, but is there a condition that pertains to our so-called standard shoring?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Let me check. Number 4.
Number 4, no wonder I couldn't find it. Usually it's 33 or 34 or something. Okay.
Page 5.
Any other comments from commissioners? Or a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that upon consideration of tentative tract map number 70146, and after reviewing the records, files, reports, and all documentary evidence submitted with regard to said tentative tract, tentative tract number 70146 be approved subject to compliance with the State Subdivision Map Act, the Glendale Municipal Code, and the 34 additional conditions listed in the record before us, and that the Planning Commission make each and all of the 10 findings of fact in the record before us today.
And I'll second that motion.
Motion support, please call the roll.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
Commissioner Torgerson?
Yes.
Commissioner Giroux?
Aye.
Commissioner Menuchyan?
Aye.
Chair Kane?
Aye, on a vote of 5-0, tentative tract map number 70146 at 124 West Colorado Street has been approved. Agenda item 9, Planning Department updates. I see the housing element as an item.
Yes, just to let you know, we submitted a draft housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development a little over 2 months ago. The state, by law, has 60 days to respond to us, so on right about the 60th day, we got a response, which was rather lengthy and required us to do some more analysis, some of which we had already done, in fact. It will be coming to you, at a future date. I did want to take this time, though, to remind anyone who's watching and the commissioners that we are having a meeting of the Housing Element Task Force on May 29th, which is a Thursday, starting at noon here in the Municipal Services Building, in room 106.
All right. Can you share with us what the agenda is for the next meeting yet?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
All right. Anything else that you'd like to share with us, Tim?
No, sir.
All right. Comments from commissioners?
Sure.
Seeing none, unless there's objection. I'm sorry, Richard?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, we're adjourned.
Thank you, sir.